It was supposed to be just another normal day in our quiet, suburban neighborhood, but little did we know, things were about to take a sharp turn into chaos. My daughter Emma, who has a disability, and I had been living in our home for several years now. It was a modest house, nestled in a small, tight-knit community managed by the Homeowners Association, HOA. To many, it might have looked like any other suburban neighborhood, but to us, it was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where Emma could finally feel some sense of independence despite her physical challenges. We had worked hard to make it that way. But then came the HOA, and everything started to change. From the very beginning, I had always felt a tinge of unease about the HOA. At first, they seemed harmless enough, making sure the lawns were kept neat and the trash bins were put away on time. But over time, their presence became more invasive. The rules and regulations, which initially seemed like minor nuisances, began to pile up. They had an opinion on everything: what kind of plants could be in the front yard, the color of the house, and even the height of the fences. But nothing prepared me for the day. They targeted Emma's wheelchair ramp. Emma's ramp wasn't just an inconvenience, it was her lifeline. Without it, she couldn't get in or out of the house easily, and her mobility was severely limited. We had built it with the help of a contractor who specialized in accessibility solutions, following all the necessary guidelines for safety and compliance. It was a custom-built ramp designed to ensure that Emma could navigate her world freely, without anyone's help. That sense of independence was crucial to her well-being and sense of dignity. At first, the HOA was subtle. They would make casual comments about the ramp, asking if it was up to code or if it might be a bit of an eyesore. They even left anonymous notes on our door, hinting that it didn't fit in with the aesthetic of the neighborhood. But I didn't let it bother me. I was firm in my stance. This ramp was for Emma's safety, and I wasn't going to let anyone dictate how she could live in her own home. Then came the first official warning letter. The HOA claimed that our ramp was not up to code. According to them, the slope was too steep, the width wasn't wide enough, and the material didn't match what they deemed appropriate for the neighborhood. They demanded we make immediate changes, threatening fines if we didn't comply. I couldn't believe it. The ramp wasn't just a construction project. It was a necessity for Emma's daily life. I spent days poring over the HO's letter, rechecking every regulation, and even bringing in a legal expert to confirm that the ramp was fully compliant. As far as I could tell, it was everything it needed to be, and more. But that didn't matter to the HOA. They weren't interested in facts. They were interested in control. The next few days were a blur. The HOA's letters kept coming, more aggressive than the last. Each one felt like a slap in the face. As I stared at the papers, I realized that this wasn't just about a ramp. It was about a group of people trying to control our lives, trying to force us into a mold we didn't fit into. I had been through enough in my life: Emma's health challenges, the struggle of raising her as a single mother, and now, this HOA was going to add to the burden. I reached out to the HOA board, asking for a meeting. I wanted to explain that the ramp wasn't just an accessory to our house, it was an essential part of Emma's life. But I was met with resistance. They didn't want to hear it. In fact, they suggested we relocate the ramp to the back of the house, as though that would somehow solve the problem. But moving the ramp wasn't an option. We had invested too much into the design, and Emma couldn't use a ramp that would require her to go around the house. The thought of her having to navigate through a less accessible path was both frustrating and terrifying. I felt helpless. I tried to reason with them, offering alternatives like adding aesthetic improvements around the ramp, but the HOA wasn't having any of it. Their attitude was clear. They were determined to make us conform, to make our home just another house, in a neighborhood of perfectly manicured lawns and pristine driveways. But I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let them take away something that was vital for Emma's independence. So, I stood my ground, and that's when the real battle began. The HOA didn't like people who stood up to them, and soon it became clear that they would stop at nothing to make us comply. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of something far worse. The HOA was not just fighting against the ramp, they were fighting against Emma's ability to live her life with dignity. And as I would soon find out, they would stop at nothing to make sure she didn't get that. It was a crisp autumn morning when everything changed. The air had that cool bite to it that signaled the end of summer and the start of the colder months. Emma was in a particularly good mood that day, a rare thing after a few weeks of battling with the HOA. She had just finished breakfast and was excited to get outside. The fresh air always seemed to lift her spirits, and it was one of those rare days when she felt like going for a roll down the ramp into the yard. I could tell she was eager to get back to her usual routine. As I watched her head toward the door, I didn't think anything of it. But there was a strange feeling in the pit of my stomach, like a warning. I didn't know it then, but it was the first sign that something was about to go horribly wrong. Emma wheeled herself to the ramp, her small hands gripping the handles of her chair. It was a beautiful day, the sun filtering through the trees, casting a warm golden glow over everything. I stood in the kitchen, sipping my coffee, watching her move effortlessly toward the ramp. It was supposed to be a safe, familiar routine: Emma rolling down her ramp into the yard, enjoying the outdoors like any child would. But as soon as her front wheels hit the base of the ramp, I heard a faint, high-pitched crackling sound, almost like static. The kind of sound you hear before a storm. My stomach flipped. I rushed to the door just in time to see her jerk back, her body seizing up in her chair. She gasped, her face contorted with shock and pain. Her hands flew up to her chest, and I could see her muscles tense, her whole body shuddering as if she had been jolted by an electric shock. "Mom," she cried, her voice shaking. "It hurts." Panic flooded my chest as I dashed to her side. My heart raced, and my mind scrambled to figure out what had happened. I could hear her gasping for breath, her body still spasming slightly as the shock lingered. My first thought was that she had gotten a static shock from something, but the intensity in her eyes told me this was far more serious. This was something different. Something was terribly wrong. I reached her and she was trembling in her chair, tears streaming down her face. Her skin was pale, and she looked dazed. My hands shook as I gently tried to assess the situation, but all I could think was, how could this happen? I inspected the ramp, searching for any signs of damage. And there it was, an exposed wire near the base of the ramp, barely visible but undeniably there. My mind raced as I realized what had happened. Somehow, someone had tampered with the ramp, intentionally wiring it in a way that allowed electricity to run through it. I quickly checked her hands, expecting to find burns or marks, but fortunately, there were none. However, the fact that she had been shocked at all was enough. My breath caught in my throat as I frantically called for help. Emma's tears were still falling as she looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. I thought I was going to die. "Mom?" It was like a zap all over my body. ... I couldn't believe it. Who would do something like this? The terror I felt was overwhelming, but I couldn't panic. I needed to get Emma inside and call for help immediately. My hands fumbled as I tried to lift her out of the chair, but she was still trembling from the shock. I managed to get her inside, calling 911 as I supported her, trying to reassure her that everything would be okay. The dispatches stayed calm as I explained what had happened, but I could feel my voice shaking. In the background I could hear Emma's sobs as she tried to calm down, but nothing seemed to comfort her. This wasn't just about the shock. It was the fear, the sudden realization that someone had intentionally put her in harm's way. I could barely focus on the details as I explained the situation to the dispatcher, but I knew one thing for sure. This was no accident. Someone had deliberately tampered with the ramp. It wasn't just a freak malfunction, it was an act of cruelty. But who would do something like this? Who would target a little girl in a wheelchair? The 911 operator assured me that help was on the way, but I couldn't stop shaking. I was furious, confused, and terrified, all at once. I kept thinking back to the days before, when the HOA had been breathing down our necks about the ramp, demanding it be removed or altered to fit some arbitrary standard. Could this have been a retaliatory act? Were they capable of this kind of malice? As the emergency responders arrived, I barely registered the commotion outside. I had one focus, making sure Emma was okay. But paramedics quickly checked her vitals and determined that, fortunately, the shock hadn't caused any permanent damage. But the emotional trauma was another story. Emma was still trembling in my arms, her face pale and strained from the experience. "I don't want to go near that ramp again," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't blame her. The one place she had always felt the most freedom had been turned into a trap, a weapon. I kissed her forehead and promised her that we would figure out what happened, that we would make sure this would never happen again. But in that moment, I didn't know how we were going to fix this. The police took statements and began an investigation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a random act of violence. The HOA had been relentless in their attempts to control us, and now they had crossed a line. The ramp was no longer just a physical structure, it had become a symbol of their cruelty. Someone, somewhere, had decided that Emma's safety didn't matter, that her independence wasn't worth protecting. I didn't know yet, but this was only the beginning. The HOA would stop at nothing to bend us to their will, and this was the final straw. The fight for justice was about to get a lot uglier. In the days following the electrocution incident, the emotional shock was still fresh, but a growing sense of disbelief began to take root in my mind. The HOA's behavior since the incident had been nothing short of appalling, and their response, or rather, their lack of response only, confirmed my worst fears. They were involved in some way, and they were going to stop at nothing to cover it up. The initial shock of the incident had worn off slightly, but the fear and anger were still very much alive. I tried to remain calm for Emma, but every time I looked at her, I was reminded of what had happened. I couldn't shake the image of her face, contorted in pain and fear, as the electrical shock ran through her body. It haunted me, and I knew that whatever steps I took from here on out, I had to do everything in my power to protect her. But when I called the HOA to report the situation, I was met with immediate resistance. They tried to downplay the incident from the very beginning. The HOA board members acted like they hadn't received my previous communications, brushing off the seriousness of what had occurred. "We're sorry that your daughter had an issue with the ramp," one of the board members said in a voice dripping with faux sympathy. But this kind of thing isn't really our responsibility. It sounds like an electrical problem with your property, not something we've had any hand in. My blood boiled. They were essentially accusing us of negligence, implying that the tampering with the ramp had somehow been our fault, as if we had rigged it ourselves. I was furious, but I couldn't let my emotions get the better of me. I knew that if I were to get to the truth, I had to stay focused and collect all the evidence I could. I immediately contacted an electrician to inspect the ramp, and to my horror, he confirmed what I feared. Someone had intentionally altered the wiring, causing the electric shock. The damage wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. Someone had tampered with the ramp, and it wasn't just a random act of vandalism. It was an attempt to harm. The investigation was starting to build, but that didn't stop the HOA from doubling down on their denials. I found myself caught in an increasingly maddening game of cat and mouse, trying to get them to take responsibility for their actions. The HOA members seemed to think that by pretending nothing had happened, they could make the issue disappear. Every attempt I made to confront them was met with excuses and gaslighting. The more I pushed for answers, the more evasive they became. In one meeting, I directly asked the HOA board if they had any knowledge of the incident. The responses were a mix of vague deflections and outright lies. I'm sure it was just a freak accident, another board member said. We haven't received any complaints about the ramp from anyone else, but this wasn't a freak accident. This was deliberate. And the more I heard them deny it, the more I became convinced that they were trying to cover up their role in the incident. I couldn't help but wonder if one of them or even the so-called HOA Karen had orchestrated the tampering. But there was no direct proof yet, and they were working hard to ensure that no evidence would ever surface. Despite the HOA's attempts to deflect blame, I wasn't about to let this slide. I called in local law enforcement, and they began their own investigation. But the HOA wasn't done with their manipulations. They started spreading rumors throughout the neighborhood, casting doubt on the situation and trying to turn the community against us. Maybe they're just exaggerating, one of the neighbors said to me one afternoon when I was out for a walk. I've heard that they can be a little dramatic over there. Are you sure the ramp wasn't just faulty? It wasn't just the HOA, it was starting to feel the pressure from all sides. The HOA's tactics were working. They were poisoning the well of public opinion, casting us as overreacting troublemakers. But I wasn't about to let them win. I refused to let them spin the narrative and cover up what they had done. Emma's safety, her very life, had been at stake, and I wasn't going to let anyone ignore that. As the weeks dragged on, the investigation began to uncover more about the HOA's past behavior. It turned out that this wasn't the first time they had gone to extreme lengths to intimidate residents. The more I dug into their past actions, the more I realized that the HOA had a history of bullying homeowners, enforcing arbitrary rules, and using their position of power to exert control over everyone in the community. They had tried to force other residents to tear down fences, alter their landscaping, and even remove accessible ramps in the past. But what they had done to us, Emma, was far more sinister. This wasn't just about rules or regulations. It was about power, control, and a total disregard for anyone who didn't conform to their vision of the perfect neighborhood. As the cover-up continued, I realized that the HOA had no intention of taking responsibility. They were going to fight tooth and nail to avoid the fallout of their actions. But it didn't matter how much they tried to deny the truth. Every day that passed brought more evidence to light. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that the HOA wasn't just a group of well-meaning community organizers. They were a power-hungry, corrupt organization. And as much as they wanted to pretend otherwise, they were ultimately responsible for what had happened to Emma. I wasn't about to let them escape accountability. I would take this as far as I needed to go legally, publicly, and emotionally. The truth came out, and the people who had endangered my daughter were held responsible. It was clear now. The battle had only just begun. The weeks after the electrocution incident felt like an eternity. Every day was a new challenge, filled with frustrating meetings, tense phone calls, and endless paperwork. But no matter how difficult things got, I knew that I couldn't give up. Emma's safety had been violated, and the HOA couldn't just be allowed to cover it up and move on like nothing had happened. What they did wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. And I wasn't going to stop fighting until justice was served. I had already hired an attorney to help with the legal aspects of the case. We started gathering evidence, photos of the tampered ramp, the electrician's report, medical records, and even the testimony from the paramedics who had arrived the day Emma was shocked. It was clear to me now. The HOA had done everything in their power to cover their tracks. But the truth was coming to light, and there was no way they could keep hiding behind their lies for much longer. Despite the mounting evidence, the HOA continued to deny everything. They claimed that they had no involvement in the tampering of the ramp, even though the physical evidence pointed directly to them. They tried to claim that the shock was just a freak accident, a technical malfunction, that could have happened to anyone. But no one was buying it anymore. Not me, not Emma, and certainly not the growing number of neighbors who were starting to see through the HOA's lies. I began speaking with other homeowners who had experienced the HOA's overreach. As it turned out, Emma wasn't the first. person to be targeted by the group's invasive tactics. There were countless stories of residents being harassed for small infractions, like the wrong color of paint on their house, or an unapproved fence. Some had been fined for simply having a garden that didn't conform to the HOA's strict standards. The more I heard, the angrier I became. The HOA wasn't just a nuisance, they were a bully, using their power to control the lives of people who had done nothing wrong. But they had gone too far this time. Hurting Emma was a step too far, and I was determined to make sure they would never get away with it. I knew it wouldn't be easy. The HOA had money, resources, and a team of lawyers, ready to protect their interests. But I had something they didn't: the truth. I wasn't just fighting for Emma, I was fighting for the safety and well-being of every person in the community who had been victimized by the HOA's toxic behavior. This wasn't just my battle, it was a fight for the entire neighborhood. The first real breakthrough came when one of the HOA's former employees came forward. They had worked with the board for years, and had witnessed the board's aggressive tactics firsthand. They had heard discussions about using their power to intimidate residents, and they knew that tampering with someone's ramp was just the beginning. They were willing to testify in court, revealing what they had seen behind closed doors. That was the turning point. With this new testimony, we were able to build a stronger case against the HOA. We also uncovered evidence that linked the HOA Karen directly to the tampering incident. It turned out that she had been the one to suggest improvements to the ramp. And although no one could directly prove she had done the wiring herself, the pattern of her actions pointed directly to her involvement. Her attempts to cover up her role in the incident only made her guilt more apparent. But the HOA was still fighting back. They refused to settle, refusing to admit they were at fault. They even went so far as to launch a smear campaign against me, calling me a liar and a troublemaker, trying to paint me as someone who was making up stories for attention. It was infuriating, and I could feel the weight of their tactics wearing on me, but I couldn't let it get to me. Emma was counting on me to stand strong. The more the HOA fought, the more their true colors showed. The legal battle dragged on, but I was more determined than ever. I wanted to make sure they never got the chance to hurt anyone again. I filed a lawsuit for damages, for the emotional trauma that Emma had endured, and for the violation of our rights as homeowners. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was asking for justice. The final court date arrived after months of legal wrangling. I sat in the courtroom, surrounded by my attorney, witnesses, and a few brave neighbors who had come forward to support us. The HOA's lawyers were sitting across from us, confident in their position, but I knew that we had the truth on our side. As the trial progressed, the evidence began to mount in our favor. The testimonies, the documents, and the expert reports all pointed to the same thing. The HOA had knowingly and maliciously tampered with the ramp, and they had tried to cover it up. When it came time for Emma to testify, my heart broke as I watched her speak about the incident. She wasn't just a little girl who had been shocked on her ramp. She was the symbol of everything that was wrong with the HOA. Her courage in the face of such overwhelming adversity inspired me more than I could ever express. She had been through so much, but still, she stood tall and told her story with more bravery than most adults could ever muster. In the end, the jury found the HOA guilty. The verdict was a victory for us, but more importantly, it was a victory for every person who had ever been bullied or intimidated by the HOA. The board members were forced to pay for their actions, both financially and legally. They had to pay for the emotional distress they caused Emma, and they were also held accountable for their unethical behavior. But the victory didn't end there. The HOA was forced to implement reforms to ensure that nothing like this would ever happen again. They were no longer allowed to make arbitrary decisions about accessibility, and they were required to provide better oversight of their board members. The changes were small, but they were enough to ensure that no one else would suffer. As we walked out of the courthouse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The battle had been long, exhausting, and painful, but we had won. Emma was safe, and the HOA had been forced to face the consequences of their actions. It wasn't just about the money or the legal victory, it was about making sure that people like Emma would never have to endure that kind of cruelty again. The victory was bittersweet, though as I looked at Emma, who was smiling, I realized that no amount of money could ever undo the damage that had been done. The trauma she had suffered would stay with her for a long time, but I knew that we had done everything in our power to make sure that no one else would ever have to go through what we did. The battle for justice wasn't just about us, it was about making a stand for what's right. And in the end, that was enough.